In 1992, a 22-year-old college student named Mike Aponte walked into an Atlantic City casino carrying $40,000. It was not his money. It belonged to a secret investment company run by professional gamblers and university students. Aponte sat down at a blackjack table. Within 10 minutes, he lost $10,000. For most people, that would have been the end. $10,000 gone before the first drink had arrived. But Aponte had been trained not to panic. He knew that losing one hand or 10 hands did not prove that the system had failed, because he was not trying to predict the next card. He was trying to survive long enough for mathematics to take control. A casino host quickly noticed the young man making large bets. Aponte was offered a luxurious penthouse suite with a jacuzzi and a pool table. The casino treated him like a millionaire because it believed he was exactly the kind of customer casinos love. Young, emotional, overconfident, and about to lose a fortune. But the casino had misunderstood him. Aponte was not playing alone. Somewhere nearby, another member of his team was quietly watching the cards. That player knew when the deck was favorable. A hidden signal had been delivered, and Aponte's apparently reckless betting was not reckless at all. By the end of the weekend, he had recovered the $10,000 loss and returned to college with a net profit of approximately $25,000. Monday morning, he was a normal student again. But the team behind him was preparing something much larger. It was called Strategic Investments. Its investors had provided approximately $1 million. Its workforce would eventually grow to around 80 players. Many were recruited from universities, including MIT, Harvard, and Princeton. They studied blackjack in empty classrooms. They memorized strategies. They took written and practical tests. They were given tens of thousands of dollars in cash. Then, they were sent into casinos across the United States and around the world. They did not use marked cards. They did not hack casino computers. And they did not secretly communicate with the dealer. They simply remembered which cards had already been played. What they were doing was not cheating. Card counting using only your mind was generally legal, but the casino still wanted them gone. This is the story of the MIT Blackjack team. The students who treated gambling like a business transformed a tiny mathematical advantage into a money-making machine and forced Las Vegas to fight a war against people whose only weapon was memory. But here is the contradiction at the center of the story. The mathematics was the easy part. The hardest part was pretending they did not understand it.
Casinos make money because almost every game gives the house a mathematical advantage has to operate. A roulette wheel does not need to cheat. The rules themselves protect the casino. On an American roulette wheel, there are 38 numbered spaces. If you bet on one number and win, the casino usually pays you as though there were only 36 possible outcomes. That difference becomes the house edge. You may win tonight. You may win tomorrow. But if enough people play for long enough, the casino expects to win. This is why casinos provide free drinks, hotel rooms, and entertainment. They are not being generous. They are purchasing time. The longer customers remain inside the casino, the more bets they place. The more bets they place, the more opportunities the casino's mathematical advantage has to operate. Blackjack, however, has one unusual feature. The odds are not exactly the same on every hand, because the cards already played are usually not returned to the deck immediately. That means the cards from previous hands affect the cards that remain. Imagine a bag containing 5 red balls and 5 blue balls. If someone removes 4 red balls, the bag is no longer balanced. You now know a blue ball is more likely to be selected next. Blackjack works in a similar way. If many low-value cards have already been played, the remaining cards contain a greater proportion of tens, picture cards, and aces. And high cards can help the player in several ways.
They increase the chance of receiving a natural blackjack, which traditionally pays more than an ordinary winning hand. They make successful double-down opportunities more valuable. And because the dealer must follow fixed rules, a deck rich in high cards can increase the chance that the dealer goes over 21. This does not guarantee that the player will win the next hand. Nothing guarantees that. but it can temporarily shift the probability. Most customers never notice this shift. They place roughly the same bet whether the remaining cards favor them or favor the casino. A card counter does something different. When the casino has the advantage, the counter bets small. When the balance changes and the player gains an advantage, the counter bets much more. The counter is not predicting the future. The counter is identifying when the price of taking a risk has become favorable. That idea was famously developed by mathematician Edward O. Thorpe. Using early computers, Thorpe studied millions of possible blackjack situations and demonstrated that the game could be beaten under certain conditions. In 1962, he published Beat the Dealer. For the first time, the public had a mathematical blueprint showing that the casino was not invincible. One of the people who read that book was Bill Kaplan.
Kaplan would eventually become the man who transformed card counting from a solo skill into an organized business. And the strange part is that Kaplan was not an MIT student. He attended Harvard. In 1977, Bill Kaplan was supposed to begin studying at Harvard Business School. Instead, he postponed his entrance and moved to Las Vegas. He had studied mathematics, statistics, and computer science. After reading about card counting, he believed he could construct a reliable system. His mother thought the plan was ridiculous. His stepfather offered him a challenge. Prove that it works. Kaplan played blackjack against him repeatedly for 2 weeks. According to Kaplan, he consistently beat him. His stepfather became convinced. His mother remained less enthusiastic. Kaplan arrived in Las Vegas with approximately $1,000. 9 months later, according to his account, he had turned it into around $35,000. He was not winning every night. He was not winning every hour. Sometimes he suffered frightening losses. But over a large enough number of hands, the mathematical advantage appeared. This is the part casual gamblers often misunderstand. Having an advantage does not mean you cannot lose. Imagine a coin that lands on heads 51% of the time. If you bet on heads once, you can easily lose. If you bet 5 times, you can lose all 5.
But if you repeat the same favorable bet thousands of times while carefully controlling how much money you risk, the small advantage becomes meaningful. Kaplan realized that a successful card counting operation needed more than players who could perform mental arithmetic. It needed enough capital to survive losing streaks. It needed accurate records. It needed strict betting rules. It needed honest employees. And it needed discipline. A card counter with a small bankroll could understand the game perfectly and still be destroyed by normal bad luck before reaching the long run. A team could pool its money. Instead of one person playing for 8 hours, 20 players could collectively generate hundreds of hours of play. The team could reach the statistical long run much faster. Years later, Kaplan was discussing his blackjack experience at a restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts. A group of MIT students overheard the conversation. They had been experimenting with card counting themselves. They approached Kaplan and asked for help. Kaplan examined their operation and found problems. Their strategy was inconsistent. Their training was insufficient. Their money management was weak. They understood the basic idea, but they were not operating like professionals. Kaplan introduced rules. Players had to memorize the correct decision for every common situation. They had to maintain the count while dealers spoke to them. Waitresses interrupted them, and other gamblers created distractions. They were tested before being trusted with money. A player might have to demonstrate hours of perfect play. One mistake could disqualify them. The casino was not the team's only enemy. A careless player could destroy the advantage. An emotional player could double the wrong bet.
A dishonest player could steal the bankroll. The team therefore treated blackjack less like a night of gambling and more like a high-pressure job. They were not trying to get lucky. They were trying to remove luck from the final result. The team's most powerful weapon was not simply card counting. It was the division of labor. Imagine a casino watching one customer. For 20 minutes, the customer bets $10 on every hand. Then, without any obvious reason, the customer suddenly bets $1,000. The casino immediately becomes suspicious. Why did the bet increase? Did the player realize the remaining cards were favorable? A solo card counter faces this problem constantly. To make money, the counter needs to bet much more when the count becomes favorable. But changing from tiny bets to enormous bets reveals the strategy. The MIT team separated the counting from the large betting. A team member called the spotter sat at the table and placed small, ordinary-looking bets.
A team member called the spotter sat at the table and placed small, ordinary-looking bets. The spotter behaved like a tourist. Talked to the dealer, ordered a drink, won some hands, lost others. But throughout the game, the spotter maintained a secret mental count. When the remaining cards became favorable, the spotter gave a prearranged signal. Then, another team member entered. This person was the big player. The big player appeared wealthy and impulsive. He might pretend to be a successful businessman, a spoiled rich kid, a celebrity, or an intoxicated tourist who wanted excitement. He placed large bets immediately. To the casino, it looked as if a wealthy gambler had randomly selected a table, but the table was not random. The spotter had already confirmed that the remaining deck offered the player an advantage. When the count became unfavorable, another signal told the big player to leave. Perhaps he suddenly wanted dinner. Perhaps he became bored. Perhaps he needed to make a phone call. The story did not matter. Only the mathematics mattered. The casino saw two unrelated customers. One person betting small, another person arriving and betting big. The casino did not immediately see the information flowing between them. It was like a military operation. One person performed surveillance, another delivered the strike. A third might watch for casino security. A team manager tracked the money and analyzed performance after the trip. The big player did not always need to be the team's best mathematician. The spotter handled the detailed count. The big player needed confidence. They had to place enormous bets without appearing nervous.
They had to speak naturally while thousands of dollars moved across the table. And they had to lose convincingly. Because even with the advantage, losing streaks were inevitable. A player could make every correct decision and still lose tens of thousands of dollars. The team's survival depended on understanding the difference between a bad decision and a bad outcome. That distinction was what separated them from ordinary gamblers. Ordinary gamblers often believed a win proved they had played well. The MIT team knew a correct strategy could still lose tonight. They were interested in what happened after thousands of nights.
By the beginning of the 1990s, the gambling industry was expanding. New casinos were opening. Large casino resorts were attracting enormous crowds. More blackjack tables meant more opportunities. Kaplan and his partners decided to scale the operation. In 1992, they formed a limited partnership called Strategic Investments. This was no longer a group of friends combining weekend money. It was an organized investment vehicle. Friends and business partners reportedly provided approximately $1 million in capital. Players were recruited through personal connections and university networks. Many came from MIT, but the team also included students and graduates from other elite institutions. They practiced in classrooms. Mock blackjack tables were created. Experienced members played the role of dealers. Trainees were surrounded by deliberate distractions. People shouted questions. Someone attempted to start a conversation. Cards were dealt rapidly. The player still had to maintain the count, follow perfect basic strategy, and calculate the correct bet. Passing a written test was not enough. The team needed to know that a player could operate inside a real casino. A real casino was loud. Dealers moved quickly. Waitresses offered drinks. Security cameras watched from the ceiling.
Casino hosts asked personal questions, and tens of thousands of dollars could disappear in minutes. After qualifying, some players were handed amounts of cash larger than anything they had seen before. Mike Aponte received $40,000 for his early Atlantic City trip. He lost $10,000 almost immediately, then finished the weekend approximately $25,000 ahead. That did not mean every trip ended with a profit. The team experienced enormous swings. A winning system can lose for days or weeks because probability does not promise smooth results. But the operation had something an individual counter did not: scale. Players could operate in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, New Orleans, Canada, and other locations. The team could generate thousands of hands across multiple casinos. Losses at one table could be offset by gains at another. And every trip produced data. How long had the player remained at the table? What was the average bet? Which casino rules were favorable? Which casinos had become suspicious? Had the player followed the system perfectly? The team tracked gambling like a corporation tracks sales, and its members had to track the physical cash. On one occasion, a team member returned from Las Vegas carrying approximately $125,000 in a brown paper bag. After attending a practice session in an MIT classroom, he left the bag under a chair. The following morning, he realized what he had done. The money was gone.
It was eventually discovered that a cleaner had found the bag and placed it in a locker, but recovering it reportedly took months and involved investigations by federal authorities. That incident revealed the absurdity of the operation.
Students who lived in dorm rooms and attended classes were casually transporting enough cash to buy a house. But as the amounts increased, something else increased too: attention. The casinos had begun learning their faces. Casinos are designed to identify patterns. They monitor unusually large wins. They record high-stakes players. They analyze betting behavior. And security cameras can follow a customer from the table to the cashier. The MIT team could disguise the pattern for a while, but not forever. The first warning often came as a tap on the shoulder. A security employee might politely explain, "You are welcome to play any game in the casino, except blackjack." Card counting with your mind was generally not illegal, but casinos were private businesses, and in jurisdictions such as Nevada, could usually refuse service to suspected advantage players. The team had not broken the rules of blackjack. It had broken the casino's expectation that customers would play at a disadvantage. Casinos began sharing information. Photographs of suspected card counters were circulated. Surveillance personnel studied relationships between players. If one customer made small bets for 20 minutes, and another suddenly arrived to place enormous bets, security looked for signals between them. A private investigator reportedly noticed that several suspected players had connections to Boston. That led investigators toward MIT. Yearbook photographs could then be compared with surveillance images. The team responded with disguises. Players changed hairstyles, they wore glasses, they grew facial hair. Some adopted elaborate characters. Kaplan recalled one young male player shaving his head, wearing a wig, and dressing as a woman so he could continue playing as a spotter. Other team members adopted identities designed to explain their unusual behavior. Mike Aponte believed being a young Asian man gave him a useful cover. He presented himself as the spoiled son of a wealthy family, someone who would naturally gamble large amounts without caring about the consequences. Casinos treated big players like royalty. They received free hotel suites, meals, tickets, and transportation. The casino believed these gifts would encourage more gambling. The team accepted the benefits while trying to remain emotionally detached from them, but the conflict was not always polite. Players reported aggressive confrontations. Some money was detained or confiscated. Outside the United States, the legal situation could be more dangerous. Aponte recalled a newly qualified team member traveling to the Bahamas with his wife, who was also involved with the team. After the player won tens of thousands of dollars, the casino became suspicious. Police were called. The couple was jailed, and the team's money was confiscated. They never played for the team again. The mathematical risk had always been measurable. The human risk was not. A spreadsheet could estimate the probability of losing 10 hands. It could not calculate whether a security guard would become aggressive, or whether a casino would photograph a player, or whether a team member would panic, or steal, or accidentally leave $125,000 under a classroom chair. The team had learned how to beat blackjack, but beating the casino's surveillance system was becoming a different game. By late 1993, strategic investments had grown to approximately 80 players. The size that allowed the team to generate thousands of hours of play also made the operation difficult to control. Kaplan might have players operating in several cities at the same time. One group was in Las Vegas, another in New Orleans, another in Canada. Every player needed cash. Every trip needed records. Every win and loss needed to be verified. Management had to determine whether losses were caused by bad luck, bad play, or theft. Meanwhile, more players were being identified and barred. The useful life of each new face became shorter. As the casinos improved their detection methods, the team had to spend more time recruiting and training replacements. And despite the popular legend, the profits were not unlimited. A card-counting team might gain an advantage of around 1% under favorable conditions. That could be powerful when millions of dollars were wagered repeatedly, but it was not magic. The team still experienced losses. Operating costs were high. Profits had to be divided among players, managers, and investors. And the larger the operation became, the harder it was to keep secret. Strategic Investments was dissolved in December 1993. It was not necessarily because the mathematics had stopped working. The business had become too difficult to manage. Kaplan concluded that his time could be used more effectively in conventional businesses and real estate. Some members stopped playing. Others created new teams and continued using lessons learned from Strategic Investments. Later teams reportedly became more selective about personality, discipline, and appearance, not only mathematical ability.
The famous MIT Blackjack team was never one permanent group with the same members. It existed in different forms across different periods. Players joined, players left, teams divided.
New organizations appeared. The legend eventually became larger than any single version of the operation. Then came the books, documentaries, and movies. The 2008 film 21 presented a fictionalized version in which an MIT professor recruits brilliant students and leads them into a dangerous Las Vegas world. The real story was less clean. Bill Kaplan was not an MIT professor. He had attended Harvard. The team did not depend on one reluctant genius. It included many players across multiple generations, and the casinos were not destroyed. Las Vegas continued making billions. The MIT team did not break the casinos financially. It broke something more important: the idea that the casino always has to win. Subscribe if you want to understand how things actually works, not as it appears in movies.